Welcome to Drive the Daf, clear, structured explanation of the daily daf in 20 minutes. You can even follow in the car.
Eruvin Daf is primarily the halachas of Breira, the sugya of Huvar Adover L'Mafreya, continued from the previous daf. I'm trying to figure out what the various Tanaim hold. So we're going to try to figure out the opinion of Rabbi Meir. We have a contradiction in that. The opinion of Rabbi Yossi, we have a contradiction in that. And the opinion of Rabbi Shimon, we have contradictions in that. So we're going to be listing through various brises which discuss cases of Breira, trying to figure out if we can actually determine what each Tana holds. Now, Breira, again, let's define. Breira means where you have a situation in which you're setting aside something or using something, but it's not clear yet what it is, and it'll become clear later what that item was. The question, does something like that work? So the Gemara has just said that we have a contradiction between two Mishnayos, between one quoted by Aya and one quoted by us, our Mishnah, about what Rabbi Yehuda holds. And the Gemara has said that Rabbi Yehuda really holds that Breira does not work. He does not hold of Breira. And now the Gemara wants to prove that. Gemara will do that by quoting this case here. So you have somebody who's traveling and he has a barrel of wine and he wants to drink it, but he has to take off meiser. So he says, you know what, the cup that I'm going to take off later, the two lugin that I will set aside later, that's meiser now. Wherever it is in the barrel floating around right now, that wine is meiser. I can't tell where it is now, but when I take it off later, then I'll know. So let it be meiser. Then I can drink other things now, because what I drink now obviously is not going to be what I'm going to take off later, and therefore I'm not drinking the meiser. So this works according to Rabbi Meir. But then it says Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Shimon say that it doesn't work. So you see, Rabbi Yehuda does not hold of Breira. So the Gemara says not necessarily. It could be that Rabbi Yehuda does hold of Breira, and this Mishnah, just the way it's set up, it's Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda who hold that you are allowed to do that, and Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Shimon hold that you can't. But really, Rabbi Yehuda holds of Breira. We could say it that way. So now the Gemara asks about Rabbi Yossi. This Mishnah clearly puts Rabbi Yossi in the camp of those who say that you can't do Breira, but we have three proofs where Rabbi Yossi says that Breira does work. So let's see those. So first of all, we have the case of two women who need to their yoledis or zava and have to bring a carbon. They are not rich, so they're bringing two birds each. One is a oila, one's a chatas. And together they buy two sets of two birds. So they walk into the Kayan's office with four birds that they bought together in partnership, and they say, here's our birds, set it up for us. So the Kayan is going to set aside one for Ayla, one for Chatas, one for each woman. Since he's allowed to do that, he's allowed to decide which is which. Now we know that the halacha is when you bring a carbon, it has to belong to the owner. It has to be set aside for the owner. You can't bring one for the wrong owner, and you also can't bring an Ayla which is supposed to be a Chatas, and Chatas which is supposed to be an Ayla. And the owners have to determine it. So how could the Kayan be the one to determine it? The Kayan has to know which ones they set aside. If they didn't set anything aside, obviously they're relying on Breira. They're saying we're setting aside the one that the Kayan will do. So Gemara says, no, what happened here was that they made a condition, and they said that we are buying this on condition that it should be for whatever the Kayan will set it aside to be, and that's not Breira. That was the conditional purchase that they had. They each owned what they need. So Gemara says, and then what's the chiddush then? If it's not relying on Breira was a conditional purchase, so then what's the chiddush? There is no chiddush here. So the Gemara says the chiddush is that the women can't change in the middle, because the halacha is, and Rabbi Yossi is relying. Well, it's Rav Chizda who spells this out. But when you make a carbon, it can be either set aside for a specific purpose if the owner bought it with that in mind, or if the Kayan sets it aside. Either of those two work to set it aside. The Kayan can set it aside. The Kayan is the one who's determining what this is. That's what the answer was before. The Kayan is allowed to determine it. The women bought it, and the Kayan is determining it. So the Kayan could determine it, or the owner could determine it. But once the owner didn't determine it at the time that they bought it, they can't change their mind later and say, no, now I'm deciding. No, you already missed the opportunity. Now it's up to the Kayan. That's the chiddush over here. Okay, so that's the first proof. That was rejected. Now another proof that Rabbi Yossi holds of Breira. This is a brisa that says that an Amaretz saw a Talmid Chacham on the way to the market, and he said, do me a favor, can you buy me a bundle of vegetables or a loaf of bread? In the market, the Chacham goes to the market, he buys the food, he brings it back, and he gives the Amaretz what he bought for him. Now, over here, if you don't hold of Breira, that means that what's happening is that the Chacham bought it, and he owned it himself, and now he's selling it to the Amaretz when the Amaretz gives him the money for what he spent for him. So the halacha is that you're not allowed to sell food to an Amaretz unless you take off meiser. We're referring here where the Kayan, where the Chacham bought it from an Amaretz, so it's the Mai. So he has to take off meiser before he gives it, before he sells something to the Amaretz that sent him. Yet, the halacha is that he doesn't have to. he doesn't have to take Meiser off. Obviously, then it's Breira. It's working with Breira, saying that when he bought it, one was for him, one was for the Amoritz. Which one was which? We don't know. When he gives him one, then we'll see which one was the one that he bought for the Amoritz. But really, he belonged to the Amoritz the entire time, and therefore there is no sale. It was never his. Now, the halacha here, there's two opinions. There's Rabbi Yossi and the Chachamim. Rabbi Yossi is the one who says that he doesn't have to take Meiser. Obviously, Rabbi Yossi holds of Breira. So Gemara says, switch it. It's a mistake. Switch the who said what. Rabbi Yossi is the one who says that it's no good because we don't hold of Breira and therefore it does not work. So Gemara says, okay, I have a third raya. This raya is, somebody says that I have fruits in my house and I want to take off Meiser. So I took off Meiser and I want that Meiser to be redeemed on a coin. Now I have coins in my pocket, whichever coin I take out, whichever new coin I take out, that's going to be the one that will have the Kedushas Meiser put on it. It will redeem these fruits. This is referring to Meiser Sheni. So Gemara says that Rabbi Yossi says that it works. So you see that Rabbi Yossi holds of Breira, because the Chil Meiser is happening now on whichever coin it is. We don't know which coin it will be until he takes it out of his pocket. So Gemara says, switch it again. This is not what Rabbi Yossi really holds. Really, Rabbi Yossi should be saying that it doesn't work. So Gemara says, how can you do that? You're switching two brises because you have one brisa that says the other way. We had a brisa with the wine that said that Rabbi Yossi holds a Breira. Here you have two that say he does not. So you're going to switch the two and save the one? You should switch the one and save the two. Gemara says, no, this one clearly you have to switch anyway, because look at the second case. The second half of this very same brisa says that Rabbi Yossi agrees that if he says that it's a new coin that I'm going to take out of my pocket, the first case he didn't say new coin. The first case he just said coin. The second case he says new coin, then it works. So obviously in the first case, the first half, the correct girsa has to be that it does not work, and therefore he does not hold of Breira. So the question is, I don't understand. How does this new coin case any better? Still Breira involved. We still don't know which new coin it is, unless you mean to say that there's only one new coin, in which case there's no Breira involved. But why did he say the new coin which ends up coming out of my pocket? That's the only new coin that he has. Someone says, yeah, you're right. There was only one new coin, and it was clear which one it is. There's no Breira involved. We just said the one that comes out, because in the ratio we said the one that comes out, because here we also said the one that comes out. The Gemara now discusses whether Breira applies both by Deraisa and a Derabanan. Rava assumes that there's definitely a difference between a Deraisa and a Derabanan. He thought that everybody who would hold a Breira on an Isser Derabanan. Just a question of a Derabanan, why would you not hold a Breira? But then he found a Brisa that says that there is no Breira even on a Derabanan. It's talking about Eruvin. And he's surprised. And he asked Rav Nachman, who's this Tana that holds this way? And the Gemara is going to try to figure out who it is, and then we're going to end up with a contradiction in what Reb Shimon holds and try to work that out, and have three explanations for the contradiction of Reb Shimon. So first of all, what's the brisa that says Breira on an Issur Darbanan? By Eruvin. Somebody says to 5 individuals, he says, you know what, I'm setting up an Eruv for one of you, and I'm not telling you who it is. And when I decide who it is, that person will be allowed to use the Eruv Tchumen that I'm setting up, and nobody else will be allowed to. So it only works if he decides before Shabbos. If he decides on Shabbos, it's too late. It would have to be Breira to rely on which one is becoming the Eruv Chatzeres for, which one the Eruv Tchumen is for. And therefore, we have to, it has to be decided before Shabbos, otherwise it's Breira, and we don't rely on Breira. It says Rav Nachman was quiet. He didn't know who could possibly hold that way. The Gemara says, why was he quiet? We saw a Mishnah on Daf Lamed Vav where Ayoy quotes Rabbi Yehuda, who holds that way clearly by Eruvin. He does not hold of Breira. So the Gemara says Rav Nachman had not heard of the brisa brought by Ayoy. He didn't know that was such an opinion. And Rav Yosef says, what do you mean? What are you struggling to figure it out? Did you check every Tana in the world and you saw that there isn't anybody who holds it that way? There's very clearly a brisa that has a machlekes whether you say Breira by Eruvin, by Eruv Tchumen or not. What's the case? The case is where somebody says, I'm setting up Eruvin once for the whole year, and whichever Shabbos I decide that I want to use it, I'm going to just decide that I want that to be where my Eruv is now, where my Tchum is centered now. But he has to decide before Shabbos. He can't wait till on Shabbos. If he decides on Shabbos, that's relying on Breira. That's at least what Reb Shimon holds. But that's what the Chachamim hold. Reb Shimon says, no, it's okay. Even if he decides on Shabbos, you could rely on Breira. You see, Reb Shimon holds of Breira by Eruvin even midirabanan. Well, at least by a dirabanan, and the chachamim do not hold of breira, even by a dirabanan. So those chachamim would be your opinion. So the Gemara says, hold on a second. Reb Shimon holds of breira, but we just saw the brisa, the case of the fellow who was carrying the barrel of wine and he wanted to drink it, and he could set aside the cup of wine that'll take off later. There, Reb Shimon did not hold of breira. How here are you saying that he holds of breira? So the Gemara offers three answers. The Gemara first of all says, okay, switch it. Reb Shimon is the one here who does not hold of breira. The Gemara has the second answer that that's talking about a deraisa, therefore he doesn't hold of breira, but here by Eruvin it's a derabanan, so he does hold of breira. Rav Yosef rejected that because he held there's no difference between a deraisa and a derabanan, that's why he didn't want to say that answer. And Rava has a third answer because he says that there's a rule called ratius, that you have to have it clearly visible and set aside whatever you're taking aside for meiser. Your meiser has to be set apart. You can't rely on breira by meiser. Specific to meiser, it has a rule that has to be visible and set apart. Other cases, Reb Shimon would hold of breira. Generally he does, but meiser here has a different problem. It's got to be set apart. Abai says meiser has to be set apart. What are you talking about? That means that if somebody has two pomegranates and he says if it rains today, this one's meiser, and if it doesn't rain today, that one's meiser. So that wouldn't be good. Why? Because you don't know which one is the one. It's not clearly set aside. Why should that be? And I'll even prove it to you. Because you have a brisa that says, it's a Mishnah actually, that if someone has a huge heap of grain and he says that its meiser is deep inside somewhere and its trumas meiser is next to it also deep inside, it's good, and there it's not set aside. So Gemara says that's not necessarily a proof. Over there it could be different, because you could at least eat the grain that's around it on the outside, because you said that it's inside, so we know that the meiser is only the inside grain. The stuff that on the outside of the heap, that's certainly okay. The Gemara says, I'll give you another answer here though, that Reb Shimon really holds of breira, but in the case of the wine with the barrel, he didn't want to rely on it, because what happens if the barrel breaks? And then you never end up setting aside anything from meiser. You do not take out any cup of it. Then the wine that you drank ends up being that it was tevel, because you never took the meiser off at all. As a matter of fact, that brisa clearly says that this is what Reb Shimon said to Rabbi Meir. This is the taina. That's why he doesn't hold of him, because he's afraid the barrel is going to break. So Gemara says, well, if it's so clear, so then how could Rava tell me that the reason why Rabbi Shimon didn't hold of it is because there's this halacha of ratius that the meiser has to be set aside clearly and separately? That's not what he said to him. He said that the problem is that the barrel might break. So Gemara answers, Gemara says, no, really he didn't hold of it because of ratius. But he just said, Rameir, you don't hold of ratius, fine, but at least you should agree that there's a concern the barrel is going to break. And that Rameir responded, he said, I'm not concerned the barrel is going to break, it's unlikely, and therefore I don't have to stop the guy from being able to drink his wine for that far-fetched reason.
Drive the Daf is a project of the Grand Woodlands Shul and is presented by Rabbi Yitzchak Landa. Find us on YouTube or subscribe to daily emails by emailing drivethedaf@gmail.com.